Hello students, the topic for today is human respiratory system. In this topic, we will learn about the human respiratory system, parts of the respiratory system, process of respiration. So let's start with the topic. First, we'll talk about the different parts of the human respiratory system and their functions. So we start with the nostrils. Now these are the two openings present at the lower end of the nose just above the upper lip. These open into the nasal chambers of the nasal cavity. The hair present on the nostrils prevent large particles from entering. Next we move on to the nasal cavity. This nasal cavity lies on the roof of the above buccal cavity between cranium and palate. Also, this nasal cavity is divided into nasal chambers by a cartilaginous septum. This nasal passage filter and clean the air. So the mucus present in this passage makes the air moist. So overall we can say that the nasal chamber acts as a filter as well as a humidifier. Then we move on to the internal nares. The nasal chambers open behind into the pharynx by internal nares. Next is the pharynx. Pharynx is a common passage for air and food located behind the buccal cavity. The entrance is guarded by the epiglottis. So the epiglottis covers the windpipe while swallowing, preventing the food and water to enter into the windpipe. After the pharynx, we have the larynx. Larynx is also known as the voice box as it contains the vocal cords, and the thyroid cartilage of the larynx forms the Adam's apple. The next part is trachea, also known as the windpipe. Now this arises from the larynx, partly covered by thyroid glands. The C-shaped cartilaginous rings provide flexibility to the trachea. The trachea is lined by glandular and ciliated columnar epithelium. Also, the mucus in the trachea keeps the tracheal wall moist and traps dust particles from inhaled air. After the trachea divides into bronchi. The trachea divides into two tubes and these are called as bronchus, and the plural is bronchi, which enter into the lungs. The right bronchus is slightly larger. Bronchus divides further into secondary and tertiary bronchi. The tertiary bronchi divide to bronchioles, which form a cluster of balloon-like structures called as the alveoli. And finally, the alveoli help in gaseous exchange. Now we move on to the most important and major part of the respiratory system, that is the lungs. Now lung students are a pair of spongy elastic organs protected by the rib cage. The left lung is slightly smaller and consists of two lobes as it has to accommodate the heart. The right lung has three lobes. The lungs are protected by two membranes known as the outer and inner pleura. The space between the two membranes is filled with pleural fluid. So this was about the lungs. Another important part that helps in respiration is the diaphragm. Now it is a muscular partition present between the thoracic and abdominal cavity. So when the ribs rise up, there is lowering of the diaphragm, which causes a decrease in the pressure on the lungs. Due to this, air moves into the lungs through the nose. And when ribs return to their original position and diaphragm rises up, the pressure on the lungs increases. Due to this, air moves out from it through the nose. Now, let's see the path of air in the body. Air enters into the body through the nose, passing through the nasal cavity, reaches the pharynx. From the pharynx, it passes through the larynx and reaches the trachea or the windpipe. From the trachea, it enters into the left and right bronchus, which further divide into secondary and tertiary bronchi. These bronchi form bronchioles and the air finally reach the balloon-like structures that are formed in clusters called the alveoli. These alveoli are the places where there is gaseous exchange. So let's see how the gaseous exchange takes place. So the exchange of gases takes place in the alveoli because the alveoli are richly supplied with blood vessels that take in oxygen and give out carbon dioxide by diffusion. So an iron containing protein, that is hemoglobin, is present in the red blood cells, that is RBCs of blood. It absorbs the oxygen from the air within alveoli and simultaneously the carbon dioxide and water vapors move from the blood into the alveoli. Thus oxygen is taken into the blood and carbon dioxide and water vapor are removed from the blood and given out in exhalation. In the mammalian respiratory system, eupnea is normal, good, unlabored breathing, sometimes known as quiet breathing or resting respiratory rate. So let's see if you were paying attention or not. If you were, can you answer this? Name the parts of the respiratory system. Which is the main organ of respiration? What are the balloon-like structure in the lungs? I hope you understood the topic clearly. For more information, keep learning with us.